it is kind of interesting how guys who have played the game, like even like recent Browns players, like Joe Flacco, guys who have been through the end of their career, and then you start to talk about young players, and it's very apparent that even some like the middle-aged veterans in the Browns sure like them some Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, they seem like, and this is why I wanted to get all the veterans around, because I just think when the veterans are around, all of a sudden, just people start talking, and you find out who exactly they do and don't like. And it just last week and into this week now, it just feels like Shedeur's got a lot of veteran support, Nick.
And so what's interesting about that is the old heads love Joe Flacco. So old heads love old heads.
Mm-hmm.
And I think young guys are like, oh no, because we're going to get into the eventual conversation of who's the locker room behind, because we have some sound on this that we're going to play. But I do think it's interesting that, it makes sense that Joe Bitonio would want Joe Flacco. This is going to be Joe's last year. It makes sense if Wyatt wants Joe Flacco, because it might be Wyatt's last year in Cleveland.
Let's talk about that for a second, though. Like, if you had just 1 year, let's put yourself in their shoes. If you had 1 year, are you doing it with Joe Flacco, or are you doing it with someone? And again, who knows what Shedeur will end up being, but you do it with one of these rookies that, they're much higher ceiling, all things considered.
Oh yeah, but ceiling. Why does ceiling matter to Joel or Wyatt?
Well, because if everything does break right, in their mind, and I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but in their mind, they're thinking Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels in the NFC title game last year. You really kind of go for a boom or bust. What does a 7 or 8 win season do for Joe Bitonio at this point?
I don't think they see it the same way. I think they look at a rookie, and rightfully so, as a boom or bust. You might get Jaden Daniels. More often than not, you're going to get Johnny Manziel.
Right, but that boom exists, though, and that boom is much higher than Joe Flacco's boom at this point.
I don't think old heads in that locker room would agree. And by the way, I'm about to agree with a greater point that we're going to make here, because we'll get to the sound in a second. But from a 1 year prism, yeah, Joe Flacco probably feels the safest because he's a veteran and because you're going to point to 2 years ago. You and I both think you're building on a house of cards there for your foundation,
right?
But I guarantee you that's how the older guys think.
Well, and that's the thing, is that like you don't need to build on a strong foundation if you're Joe Bitonio. You're one and done. You don't have to care about that's why I think it's an interesting exercise. Like, and I put myself in their shoes, and if it was me, I go for the extreme boom or bust of this scenario, because the worst thing that happens is the same thing that could happen with Joe Flacco anyway, and you just repeat last year. That's all it is. But with Joe Flacco, 7, 8 wins. Does that make you feel good if you top out 7, 8 wins?
I don't think they think that's the ceiling with Joe.
What do you think they think the ceiling is?
The ceiling is 2023 with Joe.
Ooh.
I'm not putting words in their mouth, but
what do you think?
And by the way, you and I agree. I think Joe probably gets you 6 or 7, maybe 8 wins, and that's not really any closer to where you want to be. Even in the sweetheart version of this, I think you're an 8-win team. That's the sweetheart. It's like the pie in the sky. Hey, I don't care about being objective. I just want to be a Browns fan. Give me the 8 wins with Joe. Now, you and I both see that's a very one-sided, 1 year philosophy, and no team in the NFL should be built off a 1 year philosophy. So I think it's interesting that that's how I feel about Joel Bitonio, and that's how I might feel about a guy like Jack Conklin, probably last couple of years of his career, because if you listen to Chad Ochocinco, he was on the Nightcap podcast, and it sure sounds like some of the younger veterans might just be all about Joe Flacco.
I got a couple of young bulls out there. I talked to Denzel Ward. I done talked to some people. He looked different. There's a difference when that young bull is out there spinning that ball. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Difference. I'm talking about football. I ain't talking about no media and all that hoopla and all them, on Twitter, they putting up the numbers. He was 10 for 12 for 2 touchdowns. I'm talking about when he's at the helm, he looks different. Whether he's going with the first team, second team, or third team, it don't matter. I understand getting drafted in the 5th round. All that means nothing when it's time to play football and that whistle blows. He looks different than the rest of the competition. That's what I heard. And I'm talking not Brother Ward. I'm just talking about from sources that's in that room, that's on that field, that's playing the sport.
All right, so I mentioned Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome.
Yeah, but now I'm not
talking about them.
Yeah.
He covered your tracks there. We are thrown off the set.
No, yeah, obviously nobody bought it. Sorry, Ochocinco.
Listen, I think a lot of this is incredibly early, and I'm sure you agree. Like some of this is like, okay, we get it. There's going to be camps that temp down the Shedeur love. There's going to be there are going to be people who prop it up. I think it's really interesting that before I heard this, I would just assume the vets are going to the vets, which is nebulous, but they're going to want Joe to start. And the more I thought about it, the second he said that, I was like, yeah, if I'm Greg Newsome and I'm going on year 5, yeah, I'm still comfortable in if Shador's the best guy, let's get him out there. And if it takes 2 years to get there, well, we're going to get there. Right? Like if I'm even Denzel, who might be a year or 2 away, we don't know how long a cornerback with that history of health issues has. Even Denzel, cornerbacks and defensive backs have a great vantage point on what quarterbacks can do.
They know who can play and who can't play.
They're also so removed from the line of scrimmage that you just have a different. It's like the all 22 versus like the TV camera. It's a completely different view on the field and how the ball comes out.
Denzel wouldn't have actually gone up against Shador. Now, it doesn't mean he couldn't have seen what Shador has done in some sort of practice setting and seen his ball come out. But if Shador hasn't done any work with the ones, and Denzel hasn't actually gone against it.
It's a good point.
Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean he can't tell. Why do I feel like I made an anti-Shador point there? I feel like I made an anti-Shador point.
Did you stop me in my tracks? Because I'm like, why don't you think that?
This is how everyone always says. I'm very unbiased in this conversation, so why would I? That's kind of what I'm known for around these parts. Unbiased Shador Sanders commentary.
You heard.
Can we not remember this until a very long time from now that I did bring up the one decidedly against Shador Sanders point in this conversation?
This is equivalent to Ocho Cinco name-dropping Greg Newsome and Denzel Ward and being like, I got source in that building. Not those two guys I just told you about that definitely in that building.
Fair and balanced, Jonathan Peterlin.
So now you are true. You are now in the middle ground for Shador. And I guess that makes Daryl the biggest Shador honk on the station now.
No, Daryl can't be anywhere close to the biggest Shador honk.
I think he surpassed you because Daryl would never say that.
Listen, I can't let my biases
would not let that.
I can't let it come in the way of commentary when commentary exists, and that's just I got to call it how I see it.
But it's interesting. Like I think if you go, and I don't want to put it, unlike Chad Ochocinco, I'm not trying to cover my tracks here. I would be surprised if Joe Bitonio wanted Shador Sanders to start yet. I'd be surprised if Jack Conklin or Ethan Posick or Wyatt.
How much of this is just attention driven? And I know we shouldn't think about it from this perspective, Nick, because it's an awful way to think about it. But how much is it like Denzel Ward? Like, oh, if Shador Sanders is starting and Shador Sanders is playing, everyone's paying attention to who we are. In a season where they're projected to win 5.5 games in Vegas, you have no primetime games. Not a single primetime game. You know how many primetime games you get all of a sudden flexed in your schedule if Shador Sanders is out there?
One.
A lot more than what happens if Dylan Gabriel's out there, and you know that, and I know that.
It's a good guess. When I said one, I think I saw there's a glimmer in your eye, and you were like, yeah, I think it is going to be one.
No, I thought you were downplaying it intentionally because you know that answer is going to be basically every game that he's in for the first couple weeks that he plays, and then if he's actually winning games, it'll be a lot more.
So you think Shador just starting
not starting
next
week
litany
one
of games?
Not starting week one because you can't flex in that part of things. But if he gets flexed into, if he starts week 7 or week 8, somewhere around there, I think the first 2 are instantly flexed into national games, and then if he starts winning games, the more and more and more we go. Yeah, he's a big draw. I don't have to tell you that.
He is. I just think the idea that the second he goes in the lineup, like 3 games are greenlit to be flexed, I think is a little optimistic. Maybe the first start.
I said 1 or 2, probably 2.
I felt like you said 3 or 4. That's
not what I said. You didn't say that at all.
But I just think it's really interesting. Like, I don't think Kevin wants Shador to start. I really don't. I think Kevin views the sideshow. I think Kevin's kind of like Tito, like you're either my guy, you're not my guy, and I don't think Shador's his guy yet. So I think to this point in the season, this point in the offseason, I don't think Kevin wants him to start. Nor do I think most of the old heads in that building.
Yeah, I thought Mary Kay today actually was the first time that I saw like really positive things coming from the Browns directly when it comes to Shador and what he's done in camp. Like some of what she had to say in her article today, I thought was like one of the very few signs where it's like, oh, maybe they don't treat him like he's like some sort of lost cause.
Oh, no. But I do think, I still think he's up against it in a way that Dylan Gabriel, Kenny Pickett, and Flacco aren't. Like he has to prove 5%
for sure. And he's working on doing that. I mean, obviously.
No, he is. But I just think it's interesting that in season, all right, we gotta turn the tables. The easy thing to do is to go to Joe Flacco. Hey, we're 2-6. We can't tell our head from our what. Put the vet in, steady the ship, right? I think it's interesting that that might not be how most of the or all the locker room rather is thinking about this.
Well, one thing I find interesting about it is that I don't think Kevin Stefanski cares necessarily what the locker room thinks. I think most head coaches would get a feel of it, and they'd read the room, and they would measure the temperature of the locker room. You can have all these people coming up and being like, "Play this guy, play this guy." Stefanski's given us no signs that he cares or has any sort of influence in what his decision is.
See, what's interesting is I think Stefanski needs to pay incredible amounts of attention.
I'm open to him doing a reverse course of what he typically has done, but typically we've not seen him do that.
Well, but I think the reason why this is a year that matters is we can get into all the brass tacks and all the millions of scenarios that could happen this year. I think the number one way that Kevin actually does get fired is if he loses the locker room. There's never been a more important season to listen to your veterans and listen to your locker room in general and look at, all right, who do they gravitate to? Who's the guy that when that guy's in the huddle, things snap into gear? I like, to hell with what anybody's being paid, where they were drafted. If you want to have any chance to survive with those guys who are already been, a lot of those dudes, same guys that were in the locker room when you went 3-14, the only thing you should care.
I know,
you probably should care.
And this is one of the first times in a while that he's gotten a chance to actually prove that he can do that, because the last 3 years he's put out there a guy that nobody in the locker room liked in Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, but they would have liked him if he played better. Nah.
Yeah.
You can say that about anything.
He says smiling.
Does the locker room want Shedeur to start? Listen, this is June, whatever. We're playing something of Ocho Cinco, not necessarily Albert Breer himself. I just think it's interesting. It did challenge a little bit of the way I had previously thought about it, of the idea of, man, there might just be some young guys there, or younger veterans, or even guys who are maybe halfway through their career. It's like, well, yeah, I want to build something with somebody, not a bridge to nowhere with Joe Flacco.
Well, what I thought was really nice and refreshing about it was that, it wasn't somebody just saying, we like Shedeur the person. We get a lot of that. We like Shedeur because of who he is. We like Shedeur to be around as if he's a good hang. It was him talking about what he liked about actually seeing him play football. And that, I think, goes a long way, Nick.